Western African history, the Trans-Saharan trade. The Trans-Saharan trade. Origin. This was the trade which was carried out across the Sahara Desert between the Berbers of North Africa and the Negroes, Africans of Western Sudan/West Africa. It is not clear when the trade started, but it is said to have started in the 3rd or 4th century. The trade started after the Roman occupation of North Africa and exploration of Western Sudan. Initially, the volume of trade was smaller due to transport and communication problems. Later, especially in the 7th Sea when the Arabs conquered Africa and introduced camels for transport, trade also increased. The Trans-Saharan trade started due to the desire for certain goods by the Berbers and the Negroes, i.e. gold by Berbers and salt by the Negroes. The Berbers employed the Tuaregs who stayed in the desert to guide, protect, and at times to send them to Western Sudan for goods. Initially, there were 3 trade routes used in the trade, i.e. the Western, Central, and Eastern trade routes. Factors for the development of the Trans-Sahara trade. The high demand of salt by the Africans and gold by the Berbers. The introduction of horses and camels. The development of trade routes. Introduction of Islam. The rise of Western Sudanic empires. Political stability in Western Sudan. Introduction of Arabic language. Western African history, the Trans-Saharan trade. The conquest of North Africa by the Arabs in 640 and 660 AD. The food supply grown on the fertile Western Sudan land encouraged traders. Lack of geographical barriers like mountains, lakes made that traders to move easily from North to Western Sudan. The delay in the discovery of gold in other places led to its rise. The availability of capital by the Berbers from North Africa. Presence of Tuaregs who acted as middlemen and guides. The rise of trading cities like Gao, Timbuktu acted as trading centers. The settlement of some Berbers in North Africa and Western Sudan encouraged trade. Organization of the Trans-Saharan trade. It was carried out between the Berbers of North Africa and the Africans Negroes of Western Sudan. The first mean of transport was human portage. Later, camels and horses were introduced by the Arabs. The medium of exchange at first was barter trade where goods were exchanged for goods. Later, cowrie shells were introduced to act as money. The Berbers brought goods such as salt, guns, beads, etc., and got from Western Africa goods like gold, ivory, slaves, etc. At first, trade was conducted silently, i.e. silent trade, dumb trade due to lack of common language. Later, Arabic language was introduced and used in trade. In the Sahara Desert, the Berbers employed the Tuaregs to guide them and provide security. Traders moved in big groups of 50 to 200 people for security purposes, especially in the deserts. The Berbers were the main controllers and financiers because Western African history, the Trans-Saharan trade. The organizers of the trade in Western Sudan were African chiefs and kings. The Berbers also had agents in every trading center in Western Sudan. Their kings and chiefs ensured safety of trade as well in the areas. The kings also controlled the gold-producing areas and safeguarded the trade routes. There were 3 or 4 trade routes, i.e. the Western trade route which started from Sijomosavai Takesi to Timbuktu. It was important for gold. There was also the Central trade route which started from Tunis through Gadims to Horsaland. There was also the Eastern trade route which started from Tripoli past Egypt up to Canaan Bornu. There was also the transcontinental trade route to Western Sudan. Roles played by the Berbers, Negroes, Africans, Tuaregs in the Trans-Saharan trade. These 3 groups played great roles in the Trans-Saharan trade as seen below. Berbers served as source of market for the goods from West Africa, i.e. gold, ivory, etc. They were the financiers of trade because they had a lot of as capital. They organized trade caravans to Western Sudan. They supplied goods like salt, beads, guns, etc. They introduced camels for transport. They spread Islam to West Africa, which encouraged trade. They acted as middlemen between North Africa and Western Sudan. Western African history, the Trans-Saharan trade. Tuaregs. They served as middlemen between the Berbers and Negroes. They directed the Berbers. They provided security to the Berbers. They controlled the 3 trade routes in the desert, i.e. Western, Eastern, and Central. They protected and maintained well the lakes which were the sources of water. They provided accommodation to the traders. Africans, Negroes. They provided accommodation and shelters to the traders from Africa. They also provided the traders with food and water. They acted as porters, i.e. carrying the goods of the traders. They also provided trade items like gold, ivory, slaves, etc. They also acted as middlemen between the interior societies and the Berbers. They served as agents in West African cities, e.g. Gao, Jen, Kono, etc. They guided the traders on their way back to Africa. They provided security to the traders. They organized marketplaces where the trade took place. They collected goods to nearby market centers. Problems faced by traders in the trans-Saharan trade. Language barrier. Double coincidence due to barter system. Inadequate supply of some trade items like gold. Long journeys, i.e. from North Africa to West Africa. Problem of standard measure of value. Western African history, the trans-Saharan trade. Desert wind which covered the traders. Desert heat. Accommodation problem. Sandstorm which covered and made trade routes to disappear. Diseases e.g. influenza, malaria, etc. Storage problems. Threats from local Africans who opposed slave trade. Wild animals like snakes. Shortage of water, i.e. in 1805 around 200 traders and 1800. Camels died of thirst. Inadequate capital affected trade as some traders could not afford to buy camels for transport. Heavy taxes imposed on the traders made goods very expensive. Unfavorable climate, i.e. much rainfall in the forest belts. Factors for the decline/collapse of the trans-Saharan trade. The depletion of resources, i.e. gold, salt, ivory, etc. The Moroccan conquest of Songhai, the last empire of Western Sudan. The abolition of slave trade. The Industrial Revolution in Europe made the demand for slave trade to fall. The rise of transatlantic slave trade, which was more that jihads caused insecurity. Wars among the West African states scared the traders. The cheap European goods that were brought to West markets, which were cheap with better quality. The Tuaregs' attack of the traders threatened them. The construction of the railway line from Lagos to Caen in 1913 changed the mode of transport and eased transport instead of Western African history, the trans-Saharan trade. Disappearance of oasis made life difficult and the collapse of Songhai. The colonization of West Africa by the Europeans affected. Epidermises e.g. plaque proved a threat to the traders. Failure to pay back credits by some traders in the trade. The discovery of the Mediterranean Atlantic Sea route coast to Africa diverted the trade to the coast. Effects/impacts of the trans-Saharan trade. Many kings and chiefs became wealthy due to their participation in the trade, for example. Mansa Musa and Askit, Muhammad, etc. led to the rise of empires of West Africa, e.g. Ghana, Songhai. Led to acquisition of guns in West Africa, which led to wars. Arabic language was introduced. Islam was introduced. Sharia laws were introduced. Intermarriage. Many people were killed and taken during slave raids. Led to the development of industries, e.g. mining industry. Depletion of resources, e.g. gold. Western African history, the trans-Saharan trade. Education was introduced based on Quranic teaching. Trade provided employment to people, for example Tuaregs. Led to the discovery of the West African coast by the Portuguese in the 15th century. It helped the kings and chiefs in West Africa to properly administer their large empires and states because of the taxes imposed on the traders. Improved standard of living due to importance of new goods, i.e. mirrors, clothes, soft drinks. Arabic architecture was introduced, e.g. ways of building,